We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go.
Well, hello, and welcome to episode 92 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton, and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swaddling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Summer has finally come to Blighty, and very much enjoying it.
Yeah, we always moan when it's been a bit cold and wet in the last couple of months, but it's of course now quite clammy working in the city. So it's quite good sometimes to be in the office because if the air conditioning works, it's not too bad. Well, we are delighted to be joined today by the recently appointed Executive Director of the Freedom Association, Tim Scott. Tim, very warm welcome to the podcast.
Dan, Michael, Croydon Constitutionalists, thanks for having me on, and well done on your 92nd podcast.
Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind. So, Mike, we have been publishing recordings of our live events over recent months, but it's been a little while since we've done a podcast of this nature. Has anything happened in the last few months?
I think the world of politics has been pretty dull and unexceptional, which is probably why we've not managed to get round to one of these. Fortunately, we've had our live events to keep people entertained and keep things going, but yeah, not too much has been going on. But if there has, then maybe we get to touch on it today.
I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will. Well, our guest today is Tim Scott, as I say, the Executive Director of the Freedom Association. And Mike, I think you've got a few questions for Tim.
Yeah, Tim. So obviously, maybe one thing that has happened in recent times is we've had a general election. Obviously, we were due one anyhow this year, but wonder if I can get your thoughts on the general election and what it's meant for the country.
If we had an election, I must have missed it. At the risk of sounding like Chris Kamara, no, we have, Michael, and wow, what an election it's been. I think it was remarkable, just for all the wrong reasons, really. Never has somebody won such a big majority on such a small share of the vote. 1/3 of the votes for 2/3 of the seats. I think we've seen first past the post in all its glory, if that's the right phrase. And the boffins tell us it's been the most unequal, unrepresentative election ever, which is quite the record, isn't it? But yeah, I did stay up all night in my sort of geeky way, and it was absolutely fascinating. Seats tumbling all over the place. Liberal Democrats up. I wasn't. I was quite happy to see Reform pick up a few seats. I think it could have been worse for the Conservatives, even worse. I went to a hustings here with our local MP Joy Morrissey, and one of the Conservative activists there was saying, I said, "How many seats do you reckon you'll get?" He said, "I reckon about 100." So I don't know. Maybe they're happy with 120, and there's actually some question marks over whether they're able to fill all the parliamentary posts. But no, Michael, it was quite the event, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it really was. I think it really was one of those truly historic elections.
Yes,
1906 kind of springs to mind, and it's good that there's been breakthroughs. I mean, if I'm not so pleased to see the Green Party and the independents that we get the breakthroughs they did, but actually, from a democratic perspective, people want to vote for them, and that's they ought to be represented. Personally, yeah, very happy to see Reform. I think the Conservatives got this purely personal perspective here. The Conservatives got the kicking they thoroughly deserved, but not so big a kicking as they can't bounce back, and that's probably the right balance, all things considered.
Well, there was a fear on their behalf that they would fall below the Liberal Democrats. and they wouldn't even have been the official opposition, let alone the government. So I just wonder, were there some signs of relief at 120? Despite losing most of their seats. I mean, I agree with you. We probably could have done without the pro-Gaza independence, but then, that's what people voted for. You have to respect and accept the way people vote, whether you like it or not. The Greens have gone up to 4. Interesting with the Greens. I mean, Brighton Pavilion and Bristol Central, I get, but winning Waveney Valley and Hereford North.
Yes.
I mean, nobody saw that coming. I mean, really completely out the blue. I mean, you've got to give them some credit, I guess. Won by their 2 co-leaders. So they'd obviously put a shift in to win those seats. And you've got to think, well, these are not demographically what you would think would be Green seats. I don't know. Was there a bit of a NIMBY vote there? I don't know. 2 quite remarkable results. I thought Nigel would win Clacton. And good to see the others getting in. Nigel Lowe in Great Yarmouth, Richard Tice in Boston and Skegness. And they got a very well. Oh, Lee Anderson, of course, held on to Ashfield. By the way, Lee Anderson was the only Red Wall MP to retain his seat.
Yes, very
because he went to Reform. And so I wonder if there's a bit of a lesson there. And then Reform got a very nice late surprise with James McMurdoch in Basildon and Billericay. So Essex Man who is often a bit of a. You may remember David Amos at Basildon in 1992, the unexpected John Major win over Kinnock.
Very much so, yeah.
He was that seat was the first. Seat was the first marginal of the night to come up, and it was a harbinger of doom for Neil Kinnock. I mean, Essex Man is often a bit of a political barometer, and Essex Man seems to like Reform. But I mean, where are we now? I mean, my goodness, I reckoned on the night there'd be 400 Labour MPs. They did even better than that. A lot of very small majorities when you look at it. Huge swings. Tory vote collapsed. I saw a recent estimate that the sofa cost the Conservatives 2.8 million votes. Just people staying at home, not really thinking that the Conservatives were worth going out and voted for. We've actually got a very good Conservative MP here, Joy Morrissey, who's, in my view, a pucker Brexit supporting Conservative. Her predecessor, Dominic Grieve, who a name to bring Brexiteers out in a rash. I had previously stood against him for UKIP because I thought, well, somebody has to. But I was quite happy here to vote for Joy Morrissey. Although I did wish Reform well nationally. So yes, Mike, fascinating times, but not always for the right reasons.
Well, as you say, there were a few small majorities for Labour, only getting about a third of the vote. So they've got a sizable majority in terms of seats, even if they have a very shallow majority in some other ways. However, they do have that majority. So, Tim, with this new Labour government and with that sizable majority, what impact do you think they are going to have on matters around liberty and freedom?
Yes, Dan, thank you. Well, I do worry, frankly. Not that the Conservatives were great, I have to say. And, they certainly had their shortcomings. And their 80-seat majority was nuked by COVID and the lockdowns. And just look around the world. COVID was not a time to be in government. But to answer your question on Labour, I worry that they're going to have a bit of a run now. I think the Conservatives weren't a particularly lucky government, but I think this lot might be. I worry. I think they'll show us what the ruthless application of a parliamentary majority looks like, which the Conservatives were unwilling or unable or not united enough to do. I mean, I've got some specific issues. Would you like me to rattle through them?
Very much so.
Well, okay. Well, why don't we start with not in any particular order? Why don't we start with VAT on school fees?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting one. I think it's a bit of a class war stop to Labour's left. We all know that Starmer ran on a left-wing ticket to win the leadership and has then tacked to the centre. And there's a lot of fed up people on the left, Owen Jones, and look at some of the MPs who rebelled over the two-child cap. The likes of Zara Sultana and John McDonnell, Richard Bergen, the usual suspects. There's I mean, a lot of the left are unhappy with him. I mean, you'd think they might be grateful for winning a 200 seat plus majority. VAT on school fees, which I think might only be possible or legal because of Brexit. And I gather it's somebody is saying that it might be open to a challenge at the European Court of Human Rights under right to an education or freedom for education under the European Convention. But of course, as we know, Keir Starmer said at the European political meeting at Blenheim Palace, he said, we will never leave the European Court of Human Rights, channeling Ian Paisley there, never. We will never leave the European Court of Human Rights. We'll see how that goes. I think it will force some schools to close, and it will put a lot more children into the state sector. And like the non-dom status, I don't think it will, or the kicking they're about to give the non-dom status. I think it will just backfire. I don't think it will raise anything like the revenue they're saying.
Indeed. Just on that, I'm
Yeah.
sort of been involved in education locally, and there's a huge amount of the private sector is special needs education and specialist education. That's there's false economy because the VAT will just be paid by councils, but will particularly just it will hurt the people that most need that specialist education that's really never going to be available in the state sector. What you said, it probably won't raise a lot of revenue. Is a politics of envy and is really likely to hurt some really key specialist bits of education in this country that will potentially be lost forever as a result of it.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, Mike. I mean, it's going to make private education even more elitist. Eton, Harrow, Wickham Abbey, the top schools will be fine. The really wealthy parents, they'll be able to suck up the VAT. Who will be? I mean, people might be surprised at some of the middle income parents, people that you wouldn't think of as being rich, who make genuine sacrifices, maybe on a special needs basis, to send their kids to private school. People might be surprised at some of the parents who manage to scrape the fees together to send their kids to a private school for all sorts of different reasons. Okay, so that was VAT on schools fees was my starter for 10. We then move on to what Labour have done in Wales. Labour have run Wales, or should I say they have run down Wales for 26 years. So forget 14 years, 26 years. And Keir Starmer, of course, says he sees Labour in Wales as the blueprint for what Labour want to do nationally, which is rather scary. So, and of course, we've got the ULEZ in London under Labour's Sadiq Khan. ULEZ in my book stands for Unfair Legalised Extortion Zone. And are we going to see ULEZs coming in nationally? And are we going to see a lot more widespread 20 mile an hour limits like we've had in Wales, not just outside schools? There's 20 mile an hour limits all over the shop. And of course, I was driving back through London the other day, there's several 20 mile an hour places. Outside schools, of course, they're fine. And I thought, well, if I was roaring down here at 3 o'clock in the morning, the only car on the road doing 26, I'd get a ticket and 3 points because I'm the kind of law-abiding mug that pays my MOT and insures my car and everything else. But if I had just stolen this car and I was roaring down this road at 3 a.m. doing 80, I, of course, would get away with it. So are we going to see more national ULEZ and 20 mile an hour limit? Just on a personal level, is there going to be more promotion of trans ideology in schools? Question mark. What about assisted dying, stroke assisted suicide? Not everyone would agree. Those two are last of more of a personal comment, really.
Yeah.
Taxes up despite promises. I mean, kiss goodbye to your winter fuel allowance. That's already gone. Can you imagine the howls of outrage if the evil Tories had scrapped the pensioners' winter fuel allowance? We would never have heard the last of it from Labour. They're going to have to put taxes up in some way. So fuel duty, watch out for that. The Conservatives had frozen fuel duty. Brexit put at risk. I mean, there's all sorts of things they can do. This is as Farage has been pointing out, this is not merely a Remainer parliament, it's probably a rejoiner parliament as well. We're probably looking at 80 to 85% of MPs being Remainers, maybe half being rejoiners. I mean, that's a worry. Now, they've said they won't leave the EU's single market or the customs union, but there's a lot they can do to drag us back in. Free speech under threat, guys. This is a key value. So Bridget Phillipson, their education spokesman or secretary, is threatening to scrap the universities bill, which was only just passed. And the Free Speech Union have said they'll go to judicial review if that happens. And a couple of other things, because time marches on. What I'm calling a nanny knows best quango state. If I was a quangocrat, I'd be rubbing my hands. And I'm sorry to say that Rishi Sunak's nanny state smoking ban, which in 20 years' time will mean that let me get this the right way around. A 38-year-old will have to hang around outside the tobacconists, if such places are even allowed to exist anymore, asking a 39-year-old to go in and buy his cigarettes for them. That they're going to bring that back. And last on my list, but by no means an exhaustive list, how about digital ID and a central bank digital currency? This is going to be high on the list. Of course, we'll be told for it's our benefit and our convenience, of course. So yeah, that's my not exhaustive list, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot there. Fully agree with concerns on them. The free speech thing is kind of underpins it all. That ability to challenge it, I think, is so significant, and we've seen that happen elsewhere. But I think the bright spot to me is maybe some of the ULEZ and 20 mile an hour limits. It's the sort of issue that makes people really angry, and that might be what we need for. I think some of the belief in general freedom could be really hard to translate, but tell people you're taking their ability to drive away, and they definitely get concerned about it. So you mentioned a lot there. If you could maybe pick one or two issues around freedom you'd really like to see a change of attitude, and I guess that's as much perhaps from the people and as from politics in this country, what might they be?
Well, yeah, to pick two, I mean, one would be the basic fact that the country is skinned. And, that impacts on, so much else. Our national debt is ballooning all the time, going up all the time. We're spending 100 billion a year on debt interest. This is just money we borrowed. And of course, we have reduced the deficit, but of course, the debt is ever increasing. I think, that's one thing that I think the public really, we need a bit more awareness there, really, I think. I mean, we are basically skinned. So that's one thing. And I think, to people, people say, well, politicians are liars. Well, is that because they know that if they told us the truth, we wouldn't vote for them? I mean, that's a slightly conspiratorial thing, but I think that's part of it. I mean, the other thing, guys, is as you've alluded to, is the importance of free speech. Because if you ain't got that, then that knocks on to everything else. And the Conservatives weren't as proactive on free speech as I would have liked them to have been. The universities bill was the only concrete measure they took to prevent it. Labour have come in and they tried to sneak it out on Friday. Parliament has risen, of course, now. Rose yesterday. No PMQs today, sadly. And and they tried to sneak it out in a written statement to Parliament on Friday. And of course, most people aren't into this geeky detail, and can you blame them? But if you ain't got free speech, it knocks on into all sorts of other things. You can't draw attention. And I worry this government will proactively throw free speech to the wolves. And they'll also do it as a way of lessening scrutiny and criticism of them. So I do worry about that. But I agree with you also that most people, they're not into this geeky detail. And you know, they've got too much going on. They've got families, they've got jobs, they've got businesses to run. And you know, I completely understand why people are disillusioned and fed up and just want this stuff to pass them by. But as you've alluded to, you know, just wait until, you know, people start getting fined and 3 points on their license for doing 25 and a 20, you know, down a road that, oh, that was 20, was it? Oh, you know, do you know what I mean? It's that's when it will, you know, very poor pun, that's when the rubber will hit the road.
It's ULEZ round here, and I live right at the edge of London. So I'm literally 1 mile down my road is Surrey. Really, the anger it brought out is quite amazing, and I think that really led to a long way to Chris Philp retaining his seat in Croydon South.
Yes.
The annoyance with Labour over Croydon Council, but also ULEZ, and I've seen people who are not political in nature, often pensioners, so people who are not political nature and haven't been all of their lives,
Yes.
suddenly becoming absolutely infuriated
Yes.
ULEZ, even though actually they're you know, relatively well suited, they're not affected by it. They just think, you know, how do you have the nerve? And yeah, that might be a routine for many, I think, for us. So thanks for that. There's a lot there about what's happening here, but maybe thinking a bit further afield.
Yes.
We see the EU's trying to clamp down on online speech.
Yeah.
Obviously, Elon Musk about that, and we of course have an election in the US. So, what do you think the international scene for liberty looks like?
Mixed at best. I mean, look at Canada under Trudeau, Australia under Albanese. You know, both Labour type or Labour type governments. I wouldn't trust them. I mean, thank God for Elon Musk, as you've just mentioned. Twitter X is, you know, a bastion of free speech, and is becoming quite an influential platform. I mean, I think generally I'm worried. The advance of big tech, big government, big banks, the Great Reset. If anyone thinks the Great Reset is a conspiracy theory, by the way, I'll show you the book written by Klaus Schwab and the Time magazine where it was on the front cover. So, you know, there are worries, and I think free speech is going to come increasingly under pressure, more worldwide. And I think we're dealing with people who, frankly, I just don't trust them on free speech. A bit like our government here. They will quite happily have people silenced, people who don't agree with them, and it will be used as a way to silence or to limit dissent. So globally, you know, I'm not that optimistic, to be honest. Well, there's some encouraging signs though. Still some encouraging signs, but you know, guys, I'm not that optimistic. But you know, that's up to us to fight back, isn't it?
Well, you've raised the key point there. So I guess you're obviously now in a key position behind the Freedom Association. What are the association's plans, and how can people get involved?
Sure. Well, look, the Freedom Association has been going since 1975. It was founded when we had a Labour government, Wilson Callaghan. And for those of us who were a bit older, some people might remember the Grunwick dispute in North London. I'm showing my age there. I can just about remember. That's one of my earliest political memories, delving into the memory banks there. I mean, I think it might be... can I just quickly run through our 10 principles of a free society. It'll only take me about a minute.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Is that all right? Now you can find these on our website at tfa.net, www.tfa.net. But this will just remind people what we're about. So, and we had 8, but we sadly we had to add the last 2 more recently, which tells you about the times we live in. Individual freedom, personal and family responsibility, rule of law, limited government, free market economy, national parliamentary democracy, strong national defences, free press and other media, and then the last 2 that we added more recently, freedom of religion and belief, and last but not by no means least, freedom of speech, expression, and assembly. And the fact that we had to add those last 2, we added those a couple of years ago, tells you something sadly about the kind of times we're living in. I mean, how can people get involved? I mean, if people are listening and you're not a member, go to tfa.net. You can join. It's only £3 or £4 a month, or £30 or £40 a year, £5 a year if you're a student. So that's a great way to get involved. If you're on Twitter X, we're at TFA number 4, just 4 freedom, TFA 4. That's number 4 freedom. So if you're on Twitter X, follow us back. If you are a member, you are welcome to email us at mail@tfa.net, mail@tfa.net. And we have been through a bit of a internal restructure. I've taken over the new role of executive director. David Campbell-Bannerman is still chairman, I'm happy to say. And we've just recruited a new treasurer to replace me. I was treasurer previously. And so, you know, we're limbering up for the times ahead. And I think it's kind of interesting. We were saying the other day, might a Labour government be good for us? Sadly, I don't think it'll be good for the country. We were formed under a Labour government, though we had challenges under the Conservatives as well. So that's what people can do, how they can get more involved. We will be getting some events going. And if you remember, and we've got your email address, then we do a regular newsletter update. I did one on Tuesday. So you'll be getting that. Yeah, so that's how people can get involved if they're listening. And the first step really would be to join, and you'd be very welcome, and it'd be a good time to have you.
Yeah, sadly, a bad time for the country is a good time for the Freedom Association and the Congress.
I'd wish it was the other way around, to be honest.
Indeed, of course. And just one question I've got, actually, personal and family responsibility. It's the one that isn't self-evident in its meaning, perhaps, certainly to me, and therefore I think maybe to others. Just wonder if you could elaborate a little on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give you my kind of take, my sort of take on it is, I think it's one of these slight topics that, no politicians want to talk about. Nobody wants to be the prime minister who says how important marriage is. And then, a week later, one of his backbenchers is caught cheating on his wife. Nobody wants to, it's slightly redolent of, John Major's back to basics. Nobody wants to be that guy. I mean, I think what it would mean for me, personal and family responsibility, I think I would say, particularly if you're going to have children, you've got to be responsible for them. And my personal opinion is that marriage is the best place to bring up children. But many wonderful couples and parents aren't married, so there's different views quite available on that. So I totally get that. And also, just because you're married doesn't guarantee that you're going to have a fantastic relationship, or that you're going to have to be, or that you're going to be fantastic parents either. So I'm aware of that either. But I think particularly with the raising of children, if you're going to have children, you've got to be responsible for them, and for their upbringing and their yeah, and the way that they grow up. There's got to be some parental responsibility there.
Now, that's interesting stuff, Tim. Yes, I think people do need to take more personal responsibility. I think feeding off the first point of individual freedom, you do have that freedom to do what you want, but you are responsible for yourself. And what's more, you are responsible for any children that you have, up to
Yes.
a certain age. So to me, it's sort of one necessarily follows the other, I would suggest.
Yes. I think that's a fair comment.
Well, Tim, thank you very much for answering those questions there. We very much look forward to seeing how you get on and how the TFA develops over the next period of time, even if it is under a Labour government.
Okay, Michael, Dan, thanks, guys.
So, Mike, we've been busy with our website and some events recently.
We have we've got our regular monthly events on the third Wednesday of every month in Purley. So come on down. A couple of upcoming events are the General Election 2024. How was it for you? We've got 3 candidates, so that's in August, on the 21st of August. We've got 3 candidates who stood locally coming along, and that's the candidate Vinayak, who stood in Croydon West, Marion, who stood in Lewisham, and Damon, who stood in Epsom. 2 from Reform, the first 2 from Reform, 1 from the SDP. Come along, chat about how the election was for them, what it was like to be a candidate, and their thoughts on it. Perhaps some of the same points we've discussed today, but perhaps from your chance to ask some questions. So please do come along and be part of that chat. Then in September, we have Joanne Marchon from the Taxpayers Alliance coming along on Wednesday, the 18th of September, to Purley to talk about the TPA, what they're working on, what their thoughts are following the election, the next few years, some of the tax changes we're already seeing. If it's economics and tax and government spending is a issue close to your heart, then come along on Wednesday, the 18th of September and be part of that conversation. We've had a few things also go up on our website. Out of our last event, my Tuppence Worth event, we've got a couple of articles on the website from yours truly. One of the Campaign for Liberty, so my speaking about how I think we should campaign for liberty. Have a read, share your thoughts, get in touch with me, tell me what you think. Be great to hear. And also how I felt the general election of 2024, as Tim's already alluded to, in many ways was a none of the above election. Lots of people sat on the sofa. Lots of people didn't vote for the main parties, and have a read and have a think about them. And then lastly, a couple of articles I've really been quite excited about from Sam Bidwell from the Adam Smith Institute. There's a couple of articles that first appeared on Twitter. We kind of pulled some threads together he's done. One talking about Birmingham, how it went from the cradle of the Industrial Revolution to its decline and then ultimate bankruptcy. And really talking about some of the failures of government and failures that led to the decline of Birmingham. And on a more optimistic note, how London's docklands were saved and how through some smart intervention and through the use of the private sector, London's docklands became what we see and often enjoy today.
Excellent. Well, if you'd like to write for our website or have any stories you'd like us to cover, please do get in contact. You can do so via the Twitter @CroydonConst, via our Facebook page, via our website, croydonconstitutionalist.uk, or via email, contact@croydonconstitutionalist.uk. Well, please subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel. Do please like, share, and leave a review. It's always good to get feedback, and it helps others to find the podcast. Thanks once again to Tim for joining us today, and thank you to everybody for listening. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Stay free, everybody.